So I recently made a video on addiction and how the addictions are not just physical; they're oftentimes, I would say, always emotional, and it's something emotional that's driving them. And if we just try to stay at the physical level, pretending that it's just a physical thing, it's going to be hard to transcend the addiction. And it might, if we just stop using that substance, we might replace it with like cigarettes, for example, which unfortunately also not a positive thing for us. And so it's so important to understand what the the emotions or the pain or the discomfort that is driving the addiction. And to understand that, one must first realize that an addiction is a process of distraction, relief, and escape. And a useful way to consider that is picture a person sitting in a room alone, an empty room alone. This philosopher a few hundred years ago said that the biggest issue with mankind is man's inability to sit in a room alone and do nothing. To just sit there, peacefully, contently. Well, as someone who is addicted to something, in that room would really begin to crave that thing that they're addicted to, that activity, that drug. So why? Why the craving? Why can't the person sit in the room alone and do nothing and be at peace and be content? Wouldn't that be nice to be able to do that in our lives? Wait in line, be content. Be in traffic, be content. So, why does that craving come about? Is it because the person just really likes that thing? Or is it deeper than that? I would suggest it's deeper than that. And that the reason why the person likes that thing and craves that thing and seeks it out is because it's actually offering them an escape from something else. Kind of like a balance. Like when someone really likes something, it's because there's something really heavy here that's causing them to really like it. And when you take this thing off, the balance, it can balance out on its own. So what is that thing that is heavy that the person is seeking relief from? What is driving the craving? Why is the person saying, I need to do this, I need to have this now, I really want this now? You've heard the saying that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. This is like a universal, considered like a universal law in physics, and it applies here. So what's the action that's causing the reaction of the craving? So the craving is the reaction. What's the action causing it? So there's some action going on in that person's system, some emotional pain, some suffering, some negative feelings and negative emotions that are causing the reaction of craving something. And that thing that they crave is usually creates a distraction, allowing them to get relief from that original action. So how do you understand what yours is? Well, first it's important to open yourself up to the idea that, hey, it's not just physical. There's emotional things going on here. And that's a great thing to do because that opens you up to what the addiction's here to teach you, to show you about yourself. It opens you up to transcendental understanding that's going to make your life better, which is awesome. So the next thing to do is, once you've opened yourself up to the idea that there's some sort of action or emotional pain, and that the craving is a reaction to that, an attempt to escape from that, is to imagine yourself in that empty room. Right before that craving comes on, or right when that craving comes on, what is the action going on inside of you that causes the craving. Imagine that the walls of the empty room are all white, and that your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions, conscious and subconscious, get projected onto the walls of that room so that you can see them. Well, right before you have that craving, or right when you get the craving, you will see on the wall the emotional pain or the suffering that you're attempting to escape, that you're attempting to get distraction from, that you're attempting to get relief from. If you face this pain fully, and the different aspects of it fully, you can transcend your addiction just like that. And facing the pain is oftentimes very uncomfortable for people. So they'll start to get antsy and feel frustrated and anxious, and for some people it'll just be like, I don't know. I just feel really frustrated and anxious, and so I really want to get a drink. Or I feel really bored with life, and so I really want to go do this or that. Well, that is the first layer of it. The boredom, the frustration, the anxiety, the stress, the sadness, the depression, whatever it is for you. Once you get to that layer, congratulations, you're starting to peel the onion. And at the center of the onion is the understanding that will free you from the addiction. So some people are not even willing to say, oh, this is emotional. Some people are not yet ready to say, oh yeah, my addiction comes from an emotional issue. So we would suggest that such a person is suppressing their emotional process, and is likely ashamed, even though there's nothing to be ashamed of. People oftentimes look at having emotions or negative emotions or emotional pain as a sign of weakness or being bad, or as something that is bad, something that successful people don't have. And I would suggest that's really not true. It's not bad, and it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of being a human, and it's also a sign of your evolutionary process unfolding, and a sign of the opportunity for positive transformation and growth and understanding and insight. There's this wonderful statement from a poem, a quote from a poem by Khalil Gibran. The pain you feel is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. So the pain that you feel is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. What a beautiful poem, and I have seen this over and over again. It's true. And so if we face that pain and we realize, hey, this is just the breaking of the shell that encloses my understanding. I'm about to learn something about myself. The pain is not real, except for all it's doing is serving as a placeholder for my learning process. So that's something. So once people can accept that their addiction is related to their emotions, then they can get to the point, to that first layer where they say, okay, so I must be having this addiction because I feel frustrated or anxious or stressed or bored or afraid or not good enough or overwhelmed. Now we're getting somewhere. And once you identify whatever it is for you, and it might be a mix, it might be all of those, then you're on the path of beginning to break the shell that encloses your understanding and literally transcend the pain. The pain is only there to show you that, so that you can then begin the learning process through it, the process of unfolding it and learning what there is to learn from this. So the next step would be to go deeper into the layers. So if you're bored with life, what does that really mean? Are you really just bored with life? Is that the end of the story? I'm bored with life, period? In my experience, while it seems like that sometimes for someone who's there, it's not that. And this person is also then suppressing deeper things. See, the boredom it's sitting on, it's an outer layer, and it's sitting on top of a deeper layer. And if people say, oh, I'm just bored with life because life is boring, then they've reached their limit in terms of how willing to be emotionally vulnerable, or how emotionally vulnerable they're willing to be. And that's okay. That's it. If they don't become more emotionally vulnerable, they likely will not transcend the addiction or the feeling. So in order to work through something, we must be willing to look deeper and deeper in. Be more and more emotionally vulnerable, be more humble, be more willing to consider deeper and deeper subconscious thoughts, emotions, feelings that are creating that experience of life. If we just put like a full stop on it, or a period, I'm just bored with life because life is boring, then what we've done is we've given away our power to resolve the boredom. We've said, oh, well, I'm bored because boredom is like this truth that describes life. Life is boring, and so I'm bored, obviously, and there's nothing I can do to change that because life is boring. Well, I would suggest that that's really not true. That we're projecting boredom onto life and then experiencing life as boredom. And we're telling ourselves that that's all a fact. And therefore we're locking ourselves in a cage and throwing away the key, instead of seeing that, hey, like, this is an internal process that I'm projecting onto the external world and then experiencing it as a reality. So if we want to have the capacity to transcend the way we feel, we must be willing to say, hey, like, this is coming from inside of me. And I might not understand it all yet, and that's okay, because I'm working on it. And I might not understand all of it today or tomorrow, and that's okay, because it'll take as long as it takes, and I'm willing to do it because I love myself, because I care about myself. And not everyone is there yet. Not everyone is even able to say, I love myself. And if that's you, that's okay too. It's important to understand that, hey, being caring to yourself, being loving to yourself is an important part of this process. And as you engage in this process of understanding yourself, you'll love yourself more and more. If guided, and if you watch these videos, that is the intention of these videos. And loving yourself is a good thing. That said, this is off the topic of what we're talking about, so we'll talk about that, the benefits of loving yourself in another video, the importance of loving yourself. So, someone has this experience of life that says, life is boring, and I'm bored. And they're in the first layer. They're recognizing that their addiction, their feeling of boredom or anxiety or stress, is coming from an emotional issue. The next step would be to say, well, why do I have these feelings of boredom inside of me? Now they're moving towards layer number 2 of the onion. They're going deeper into the onion by simply asking a question, by focusing their attention in a direction that leads to healing. So when we do that and we ask, what's underlying this boredom? Why do I feel this boredom? We must do so not just from an intellectual vantage point. That said, we must also do so from an emotional and feeling vantage point. Not just, why do I think I'm bored? Why do I feel bored? And to do that, it's useful to put oneself in a sort of empty room and sit there and feel the boredom. Sort of in a process of meditation or introspection. So you feel the boredom that you feel. Maybe you feel it somewhere in your body. Maybe it's stress for you, or anxiety, or fear, or overwhelm, or sadness, or depression. You face the first layer. You allow yourself to feel the feelings. And you start to just ask yourself, to inquire, what is this boredom? Why do I feel it? What is it coming from? And you might hear a thought or feel a feeling. It says, like, I feel bored because I don't have any of these things in my life. So now you have gotten to the second layer, if you have come to that. Or I feel overwhelmed because this and this and this might happen in my life. Or I feel depressed because this and this and this happened in the past and it was so terrible. So you see, by just intending to understand yourself more deeply, by sitting with the feeling, allowing yourself to feel it, you can understand what your body, what your system, what your emotions, what your thoughts are projecting and experiencing in a way that are then causing the boredom or the anxiety or the depression. And so you've gone one more layer under. So now you know, okay, well, I feel like I'm not experiencing A, B, and C. And as a reaction to that experience, I feel bored in my life. So congratulations, you're 2 layers into the onion now. So now when we look at that layer where, okay, I'm not experiencing A, B, and C. What is the meaning of that? What does that imply about us? If we feel bored and even depressed because we're not experiencing A, B, and C, might that mean that we have some sort of emotional attachment to A, B, and C, where we feel like we need A, B, and C in order to be happy? And this is very interesting because if I ask you if you're in an empty room, and Blaise Pascal said, the problem with mankind is man or woman's inability to sit in a room alone and do nothing. Well, does an empty room include A, B, and C? No. So what we see is that the person actually has a deeper addiction. So they think, oh, I drink because I'm bored with life. Really? Maybe you're bored with life because you don't have these deeper A, B, and C things that you're truly addicted to. So we see that that beneath an addiction is a deeper addiction, and now we're one step closer to we're actually many steps closer to transcending this one once this deeper understanding has occurred. Let me do it for a few other examples. So if the person was partying a lot and doing cocaine a lot because they felt overwhelmed in life, and they felt like they needed an escape and a relief. So let's say they just knew that they felt overwhelmed. Well, once they meditated on that feeling, they might find, oh my gosh, I just feel so overburdened by these expectations. I have to make this much money. I have to be a good dad. I have to do these different things and meet these expectations of my wife and my parents and myself and my children. And I'm just so overwhelmed. And the only time that I feel free from that feeling of overwhelm is when I do cocaine and I go party. So you see there that the person who's addicted to cocaine the cocaine is just a tool to escape their feeling of feeling overwhelmed from how they've absorbed these expectations that they're placing on themselves now and feeling overwhelmed by. So you see how we're going into the onion, and how once we go from the addiction, maybe that's the most outer layer of the onion, then one layer in is the feeling of being overwhelmed, and then another layer in is the feeling of having all of these expectations that they feel like they can't meet. You see how we're really getting somewhere here. It is through this sort of approach, this continuous focus and intention on understanding oneself in this way, that one's addiction will be transcended, that you'll transcend your addiction. Now some might say, oh, I understand everything about myself. Well, no, not yet. There's more to go. So if you keep going in this direction and don't put the period at the end of that sentence, I understand everything, don't put the full stop. If you still have the addiction, there's more to learn. The pain you feel is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Once you have the full understanding, the addiction will be gone. It's there to help you get that understanding. So if we look at layer 3, let's call it, which is the layer of those expectations that the person who was overwhelmed and doing cocaine to get freedom from that feeling of overwhelm, that's what they were feeling. Was deeper down, they were feeling those expectations of having to make a certain amount of money, of having to be like a good dad, and things like that. And they were feeling overwhelmed in their life. You're getting very deep into someone's internal process when you're doing this, or at least deeper. And you start to learn about how people operate. And expectations is a key thing that people use to function in the world. And expectations are something that are the number one cause of stress. and therefore the number one cause of heart disease. Well, 95% of people who go to the hospital are there because of a stress-related illness. So, expectations, you might say, are the number one cause of our stress, and that without any self-expectations or expectations about life, that stress goes away and we have peace. Consider this. Consider the person in the empty room, sitting alone. That person if they had any expectations about that process, they wouldn't be able to be at peace and content in the room. If they were expecting, the door's going to open in about 5 minutes and then I'm going to get out of here, then they would be, kicking their leg, waiting for the door to open. And if it didn't open in 5 minutes, they'd no longer be at peace. And if they were waiting for the door to open, then would they really be at peace at all or content? They had an expectation that they were going to get some food soon. They wouldn't be at peace or content. They'd be waiting for the food. If they had an expectation that they had to sit in the room and do a really good job of just being at peace, then they probably wouldn't be able to be at peace because they'd be thinking, okay, I can't have this thought, I can't have that thought, I have to be peaceful. If they had a self-expectation that they had to be on time later that day to pick someone up and take them home, or to make dinner, or to help somebody, then that self-expectation would bring them stress and anxiety in that room, and they wouldn't be at peace or content. If they had a self-expectation that they had to be like a good person and be perfect and always be there for people, then they might find their mind wandering back to the past and a time where they felt like they failed somebody. And so then they wouldn't be in that room at peace. So you see how expectations prevent us from being at peace. And now the full catch of this is that if we're not at peace and we're not content, then are we really capable at being optimally effective in our lives? And for example, if you have two people, person A is someone who's like stressed, has a bunch of self-expectations and is therefore stressed and really wants to be a good person, and it's an expectation they place on themselves, and so they're kind of worried and really trying. That said, then you have person B who also simply intends to be a good person, or intends to love, and is not placing a bunch of self-expectations on themselves and saying, I have to do this, I have to do that. Instead, they're just They're just at peace. They're observing the environment, they're being present, they're being aware, they're being calm. They're operating in alignment with the present moment, maybe with God, and they want to help. So who do you think would be better capable of providing help in those examples? I would go with person B. Most people would. And so you see how the process of expectation and of self-expectation is not necessary, and it's actually superfluous. It's like extra. It's an attempt that we make to make sure that we do something. Now, philosophically speaking, or just practically speaking, humanly speaking, there's a big difference between trying to make sure we do something. There's a difference between that and just doing it. You can simply do something without trying to make sure that you do something. And whenever we try to make sure that we do something, make sure we make enough money, make sure that we're a good person, we end up placing a lot of self-expectations that cause us to feel a lot of pressure and stress and anxiety and to feel overwhelmed. And lo and behold, if we continue to do that for long enough, that overwhelm can turn into an addiction. So then we start to use things, people, relationships or drugs to try to get and to feel relief from that feeling of overwhelm. And if that addiction gets bad enough, hopefully it motivates us to look deeper and to understand what's really causing the addiction so that we can get back to the root of it. The root of it being these self-expectations that we placed on ourselves. With our own energy. Those self-expectations don't come from anyone. Even though people might say, hey, you have to do this, you have to do that. That doesn't mean we need to inherit that and absorb it and then apply it to ourselves. No one can make you feel anything internally. You have your free will inside, and you can be at peace and content. You can release your self-expectations. You have that power because your self-expectations come from you. They are you. That is your energy. Any thought you have, any emotion you have is not being put in your mind by someone else. It's something that you've resonated with, that you've accepted and agreed to, and that now some part of your conscious mind or subconscious mind or emotional system is doing. And if you realize that, hey, I'm doing that, then guess who can stop doing that? And apply that energy towards something else, like inner peace and contentment. And if now there's inner peace and contentment and far less energy of self-expectation, then there's less overwhelm. And if there's less overwhelm, you think there's less addiction? I do. I've seen it. So with the person who was bored, maybe underneath their boredom was a feeling of not having A, B, and C. So why did they need A, B, and C? Maybe they felt like, in life, I need to be like a really successful business person, and I need to be like a strong and powerful woman or man, and so for a man, it might be they need to have sex with lots of women, and or there can be many root causes to addiction, and it's different for everybody. In this example we're using, there's a man who wants to be a very successful business person and wants to be seen as like a sort of man's man, for example, and they inevitably they will feel like they're not meeting those standards that they place on themselves, also expectations. if they don't get to that core of that feeling where they feel like, I need to be like this type of successful man, and this is what that would look like. If they don't get to the core of that feeling of need, that feeling of that having that identity, then they'll never understand why they're feeling bored. You see, the boredom is not, just boredom. It's not so. There's more to it. The boredom comes from not having these things that human being has decided somewhere, consciously or subconsciously, that they need in order to feel safe or successful in the world. So the freedom from that would come from realizing that they don't need to anything. They don't need to have any identity, to have any number of relationships, or to have any amount of money in order to be perfect, just as they are. In order to be a wonderful child of God, deserving child of God. And that if they want those things, that's fine. If they want to have money, that's fine. That doesn't mean that they need to drive themselves mercilessly with this underlying belief that they somehow need those things immediately now. You see how in this example that person is also putting themselves in a sort of very pressurized scenario where they don't have what they need. They need to have a lot of money, they need to be successful, they need to have this sort of status. They don't have it. Maybe they go to like a middle income job, or even an upper middle income job, but they work for a big company, and maybe they're only a manager at this company that has like directors, VPs, and they feel like they should be the CEO at least one day, and so they pressure themselves to, because they're so ambitious, they pressure themselves so much, and so then that leads to a reactive feeling of being bored in life because they don't have those things. And you see how the boredom is directly linked to their need for that identity of being a successful business person, or a successful man, or a successful woman. And so if they don't get to the core of that need and understand why it exists in them, why they have that need, if they don't allow themselves to feel that need, then they're never going to get, then they probably won't get to the core of their addiction, to the core of the boredom which fuels the addiction. So I feel that these two examples have done a really good job of helping to demonstrate how this process works, of this process of self-awareness and self-understanding, and how it can lead to these powerful transformations and to one truly transcending addiction. Even though some people say that, once you're an addict, you're always an addict, and you live in recovery, and every other day could be, you could lose it and go back to being an addict. I perceive that through this process of self-awareness, you can transcend addiction. And this is why I believe transcendental consciousness is so incredible. And I'm devoting my life to personally finding as many of these aspects of transcendental consciousness, these different pieces of understanding that can be applied to people's lives. I'm collecting these and doing my best to share them in a way that people can understand and apply to themselves, to transcend their suffering, their pain, their addictions, to have better relationships, to enjoy their lives more, to be more free, to operate more in alignment with God and why ever we're here, so that we can make something wonderful from this opportunity of life and of experiencing God. And so I hope that this has been enlightening for you, and that you have had a first-person experience of how transcendental consciousness can work. How, like, for example, the understandings that I shared about the process of self-expectation. That is a little lesson of transcendental consciousness. You now have a form of transcendental consciousness in regards to the process of self-expectation. You're now conscious of the limiting dynamics of self-expectation. You're now conscious also of how addiction is a layered thing, and it has its emotional roots. And so now you have a sort of transcendental consciousness about that. Transcendental because it allows you to heal, clear, and release old patterns that weren't serving you, pain, misunderstanding. Consciousness because it's done through a process of awareness, of enlightenment. I also like to call it transcendental loving consciousness because there is so much love in this information that I'm collecting, that I'm finding. And one great resource, someone who's so loving and so wise that I've learned so much from, is John Jones, that I like to mention in my videos because I've worked with many spiritual teachers and studied many spiritual teachers and philosophers, and the one who's been most beneficial in my process of in my own life and my process of helping others as a life coach is the help that I've gotten from John Jones. So, and how much transcendental consciousness, transcendental loving consciousness that I've received from John Jones. So I hope that you found this video helpful and that you check out the addiction playlist for more videos like this, and that you like and share this video with friends that you feel could, or family members that you feel could be helped by this. And if you want deeper help, one-on-one help, it does make a big difference in my own personal experience, having received one-on-one help, and in my experience helping others one-on-one. So if you visit our website, you can just contact us, and we'd be happy to set up a one-on-one session. Thank you for taking the time. Please leave your comments. I'd love to see those, and I hope you have a great day.